A wealthy father asked his son to choose a new mother from 5 millionaire women. But the boy's choice shocked everyone and changed their lives forever. The marble floors of the Silverstone mansion echoed with the sound of expensive heels clicking against cold stone. Marcus Silverstone stood in his grand living room, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie for the third time in 5 minutes. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day that would determine his son's future and perhaps his own redemption. The room was filled with an uncomfortable tension that seemed to suffocate every corner of the luxurious space. 5 women sat elegantly on the pristine furniture, each one more stunning and accomplished than the last. They had been carefully selected, not by love or chance, but by a computer algorithm that matched wealth, status, and social compatibility. Each woman represented everything Marcus thought his son needed: security, refinement, and a life of privilege that would ensure Ethan never wanted for anything. But as Marcus watched his young son fidget nervously by the grand piano, something felt terribly wrong. Ethan's small fingers traced the ivory keys without making a sound, his eyes distant and filled with a sadness that no child should carry. The boy had barely spoken since his mother's passing, and Marcus had convinced himself that finding a new mother figure would heal the wounds that time seemed unable to touch. "Ladies," Marcus began, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire but trembling with an uncertainty he rarely showed. "Thank you all for coming today. As I explained, my son Ethan will be making a very important decision." The first woman, Victoria, smiled with practiced perfection. She was the daughter of a tech mogul, with degrees from prestigious universities and a portfolio that rivaled most Fortune 500 companies. Her presence commanded respect, and she had already begun planning how to mold Ethan into the perfect heir to both family fortunes. Beside her sat Anastasia, a renowned surgeon whose hands had saved countless lives. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never failed at anything she attempted. Her analytical mind had already assessed Ethan's needs and formulated a comprehensive plan for his development and education. The third candidate, Isabella, was a celebrated artist whose paintings hung in galleries across Europe. She embodied creativity and sophistication, believing she could unlock Ethan's artistic potential while providing him with cultural experiences beyond imagination. Her gentle demeanor masked an iron will that had carved her path to international recognition. Celeste, the fourth woman, was a successful entrepreneur who had built her fashion empire from nothing. She understood both luxury and hard work, and she saw in Ethan a kindred spirit who could benefit from her guidance in building character through achievement. Her warm smile promised adventure and growth. Finally, there was Natasha, a diplomat's daughter who spoke 7 languages and had negotiated peace treaties in 3 different countries. She offered Ethan a window to the world, connections that could open any door, and the refinement that came from generations of high society breeding. Each woman was extraordinary in her own right, and any of them would have been considered the perfect match by society's standards. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying child psychology, researching Ethan's interests, and crafting presentations that would appeal to a young boy's imagination. But as the formal introductions began, something else was happening in the background that no one in that room could have predicted. Through the tall windows that overlooked the mansion's sprawling gardens, a figure moved quietly along the glass, methodically cleaning each pane with practiced efficiency. Sofia Martinez had been working at the Silverstone mansion for several months. Unlike the women inside, she hadn't been invited to this gathering. She was invisible to most of the household, just another face among the staff who kept the machinery of luxury running smoothly. But to Ethan, she was something entirely different. While the 5 candidates spoke about their accomplishments and their visions for Ethan's future, the boy's attention kept drifting to the window. Sophia was humming softly as she worked, a melody that seemed to cut through the formal atmosphere like a warm breeze. It was the same tune she had hummed while helping Ethan with his nightmares, the same song that had comforted him when the weight of his loss felt too heavy for his small shoulders to bear. Marcus noticed his son's distraction and felt a surge of frustration. This moment was supposed to be about Ethan's future, about choosing the woman who would guide him into manhood and ensure the family legacy continued. Yet the boy seemed more interested in the cleaning lady than in the carefully curated selection of potential mothers before him. "Ethan," Marcus called softly, trying to redirect his son's attention. Victoria was telling you about the trip to Switzerland she's planning. Wouldn't you like to learn to ski? The boy turned slowly from the window, his eyes reflecting a wisdom that seemed far beyond his years. "Daddy," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. "Why isn't Sophia here?" The question hit the room like a thunderclap. The 5 women exchanged glances, some confused, others slightly offended that their carefully planned presentations were being interrupted by mention of household staff. Marcus felt his carefully constructed plan beginning to crumble as he realized his son's heart was pointing in a direction he had never considered. "Sophia is working, son," Marcus replied, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "This is about your future, about choosing someone who can give you everything you need." But even as he spoke the words, Marcus could see the disconnect between what he thought his son needed and what Ethan's heart was telling him. The boy's eyes held a clarity that cut through all the wealth and status in the room, seeing something that the adults had missed entirely. Outside the window, Sophia continued her work, unaware that her simple presence was about to turn the Silverstone family's world upside down and challenge everything Marcus thought he knew about love, family, and what truly mattered in life. The tension in the room became suffocating as Ethan's innocent question hung in the air like a challenge to everything Marcus had carefully orchestrated. The 5 women shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their perfectly rehearsed presentations suddenly feeling hollow and inadequate. This wasn't how the day was supposed to unfold. Victoria cleared her throat delicately, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Ethan, sweetie," she said with practiced warmth, "I understand you're fond of the help, but this is about finding someone who can truly take care of you, someone who can give you opportunities and experiences that money can buy." But Ethan's expression remained unchanged, his small face set with a determination that reminded Marcus painfully of his late wife, Elena. The boy had inherited her stubborn streak and her ability to see straight to the heart of matters that adults tried to complicate. "Sophia doesn't need money to take care of me," Ethan replied simply, his words cutting through the sophisticated arguments like a knife through silk. "She already does." The statement sent shockwaves through the assembled group. Anastasia leaned forward, her medical training kicking in as she tried to analyze the situation. "Children often form attachments to familiar figures during times of grief," she explained to Marcus in a low voice. "It's a normal part of the healing process, but it shouldn't influence such an important decision." Marcus felt his world tilting off its axis. He had spent months planning this moment, consulting with child psychologists, family therapists, and social advisors. Everyone had agreed that Ethan needed stability, structure, and the kind of advantages that only came with the right connections and unlimited resources. Yet here was his son, dismissing all of that wisdom with the simple clarity that only children possess. "Ethan," Marcus said, kneeling down to his son's level, his voice struggling to remain patient. "These ladies have come here specifically to meet you. They've prepared wonderful things to share, places they want to take you, experiences they want to give you. Don't you think you should at least listen?" The boy looked at each of the 5 women in turn, his gaze respectful but distant. They were beautiful, accomplished, and clearly successful in their own rights. Any one of them could provide him with a life of luxury and opportunity that most children could only dream of. But something fundamental was missing, something that no amount of money or status could purchase. Isabella, sensing the shift in momentum, tried a different approach. "Ethan, I have a studio in Paris where we could paint together. I could teach you to create beautiful art, and we could travel to see the greatest masterpieces in the world." Celeste nodded enthusiastically. "And I could show you how to build something from nothing, how to turn dreams into reality. We could start your own company, teach you about business and innovation." Natasha added her own enticement. "Think of all the countries we could visit together, all the languages you could learn. The world would be your classroom." Each offer was more extravagant than the last, painting pictures of a future filled with privilege and possibility. But with every word, Ethan seemed to withdraw further into himself, his eyes drifting back to the window where Sophia continued her quiet work. Marcus felt a growing panic. This wasn't just about finding Ethan a mother figure. It was about securing his son's future, ensuring he would never want for anything, never face the struggles that Marcus had endured in his own childhood. The idea that a cleaning lady could provide what these accomplished women could not seemed not just unlikely, but dangerous. "Son," Marcus said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "Sophia is a wonderful person, but she can't give you the life these ladies can. She can't open the doors they can open, can't provide the education and opportunities that will prepare you for your inheritance." For the first time that day, Ethan looked directly at his father, and Marcus was struck by the depth of emotion in those young eyes. "Mama didn't have money when you met her," Ethan said quietly. "But you chose her anyway." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena had indeed been working as a waitress when they met, struggling to put herself through community college while supporting her sick mother. Marcus had fallen in love with her spirit, her kindness, her ability to find joy in simple things. She had taught him that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought or sold. But that was different, Marcus told himself. That was before the responsibility of raising a child alone, before the weight of ensuring his son's future success. The world was harder now, more competitive. Ethan would need every advantage he could get. Victoria, sensing Marcus's internal struggle, stood up gracefully. "Perhaps we should give you and Ethan some time to think this over," she suggested diplomatically. "These are big decisions and rushing them helps no one." The other women murmured their agreement, but Marcus could see the disappointment in their faces. They had invested time and emotional energy into this possibility, and now it was slipping away because of a child's attachment to household staff. As the women began to gather their belongings, preparing for a dignified retreat, Ethan suddenly moved toward the window. His small hands pressed against the glass as he watched Sophia finishing her work on the outer panes. She looked up and saw him, her face breaking into the kind of genuine smile that couldn't be practiced or perfected. Sophia waved at Ethan, her simple gesture carrying more warmth than all the sophisticated presentations combined. She mouthed the words, "See you later, little prince," using the pet name she had given him during their quiet moments together. The boy's face lit up with pure joy, an expression Marcus hadn't seen since before Elena's death. It was the kind of happiness that came from being truly seen and understood, from feeling safe and valued for exactly who you were. Marcus watched this exchange with a growing sense of unease. He had been so focused on providing for Ethan's future that he had missed what his son needed in the present. The connection between Ethan and Sophia was real, built on genuine care and understanding rather than obligation or opportunity. But accepting this meant admitting that his carefully laid plans might be wrong, that perhaps the most important thing he could give his son wasn't wealth or status, but something far more precious and infinitely more difficult to find. As the 5 women left the mansion, their hopes of joining the Silverstone family fading with each step, Marcus stood alone with his son in the grand living room that suddenly felt more like a beautiful prison than a home. The real choice, he was beginning to realize, wasn't between 5 accomplished women. It was between the life he thought Ethan should have and the life his son's heart was telling him he needed. Outside, Sophia finished packing her supplies and walked toward the service entrance, unaware that her quiet presence had just shattered the foundation of one of the most carefully planned days in the Silverstone family's history. The mansion felt eerily quiet after the departure of the 5 women. Marcus paced the length of his study, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floor in a rhythm that matched his racing heartbeat. Through the tall windows, he could see Sophia packing up her cleaning supplies, preparing to move to another section of the estate. Her movements were graceful and purposeful, each action carried out with a dignity that seemed to mock his growing confusion. Ethan had gone to his room after the uncomfortable encounter, claiming he wanted to draw. But Marcus knew his son well enough to recognize the signs of deep contemplation. The boy was processing what had happened, probably wondering why his simple, honest choice had created such chaos among the adults. Marcus couldn't shake the image of his son's face lighting up when Sophia waved at him. It was a moment of pure connection, untainted by expectations or agendas. When was the last time he had seen Ethan respond to anyone with such genuine affection? When was the last time anyone had looked at his son and seen just a little boy who needed love, rather than an heir who needed molding? A soft knock on the study door interrupted his troubled thoughts. "Come in," he called, expecting to see his assistant or perhaps the household manager with some urgent matter requiring his attention. Instead, Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper who had been with the family since before Ethan's birth, entered with a tea service. Her weathered face carried an expression Marcus had learned to recognize over the years, the look of someone who had something important to say, but was choosing her words carefully. "I thought you might need some refreshment after this afternoon's events," she said diplomatically, setting the tray on his desk with practiced efficiency. Marcus accepted the cup gratefully, using the moment to study the woman who had become like family over the years. Mrs. Henderson had been Elena's confidant, the one person who had truly understood his wife's generous spirit and unwavering kindness. If anyone could help him make sense of what had happened today, it would be her. "Margaret," he said, using her first name in a way that signaled this was a personal conversation rather than a professional one. "I need to understand something. What exactly is the relationship between Ethan and Sophia?" The older woman settled into the chair across from his desk, her movements deliberate and measured. "That's a question I've been hoping you would ask for some time now," she said quietly. "But perhaps it's not the relationship you should be questioning, but rather why you've been blind to it." Marcus felt a flash of irritation at her cryptic response, but he forced himself to remain calm. Mrs. Henderson had earned the right to speak plainly after decades of loyal service, and her insights had often proven valuable in the past. "I'm not blind to anything," he protested. "I know Ethan has grown fond of her, but that's natural enough. She's kind to him, and children respond to kindness. But that doesn't mean she's suitable to be part of this family in any meaningful way." Mrs. Henderson's expression grew stern, and Marcus was reminded of his own childhood governess, who had never hesitated to correct him when his thinking went astray. "Mr. Silverstone," she said formally, "with all due respect, you have no idea what Sophia Martinez has done for your son." The words hit him like a challenge, and Marcus found himself leaning forward despite his intention to remain aloof. "Then tell me," he said simply. "Sophia arrived here months ago when Ethan was at his lowest point, Mrs. Henderson began, her voice taking on the cadence of someone revealing a long-held secret. "You were traveling constantly, trying to lose yourself in work, and that poor child was drowning in grief and loneliness. The other staff members tried their best, but Ethan had built walls around himself that seemed impossible to breach." Marcus remembered those dark days with painful clarity. He had indeed thrown himself into his business, convincing himself that securing the company's future was the best way to honor Elena's memory and provide for Ethan. But hearing it described from an outside perspective made him realize how it must have appeared to his son, like abandonment at the very moment when he needed his father most. "Sophia was different from the others," Mrs. Henderson continued. "She didn't try to cheer him up or distract him from his pain. Instead, she simply sat with him when he cried, hummed the same lullabies his mother used to sing, and treated his grief as something sacred rather than something to be fixed." The image painted by these words struck Marcus with unexpected force. He had been so focused on finding solutions, on moving forward and building a new life, that he had forgotten the importance of simply acknowledging the loss. Elena had always understood that healing couldn't be rushed or manufactured. It had to grow naturally, like a garden tended with patience and love. "There's more," Mrs. Henderson said, noting his stunned expression. "Sophia has been helping Ethan with his nightmares, the ones you don't know about because they happened during your late business calls. She's been teaching him Spanish, sharing stories about her own childhood, and showing him that it's possible to carry sadness and joy at the same time." Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet as he realized how much of his son's life had been happening without his knowledge or participation. While he had been orchestrating elaborate plans for Ethan's future, Sophia had been quietly nurturing his present, providing the emotional support that no amount of money or status could replace. "But she's just the cleaning lady," Marcus said weakly, the words sounding hollow, even to his own ears. Mrs. Henderson's expression grew sad, and Marcus realized he had revealed more about his own prejudices than he had intended. "Sophia Martinez has a master's degree in early childhood education," she said quietly. "She speaks 4 languages fluently and was a teacher in her home country before circumstances forced her to emigrate. She took this job because she needed to support her elderly parents, not because she lacked other options." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. All of his assumptions about Sophia's capabilities and qualifications crumbled in an instant, replaced by a growing awareness of his own narrow-minded thinking. He had looked at her occupation and made judgments about her worth, never bothering to see the person beneath the uniform. "Why didn't anyone tell me this before?" he asked, though even as he spoke the words, he suspected he knew the answer. "Would you have listened?" Mrs. Henderson replied gently. "You had your mind made up about what kind of woman should be part of Ethan's life. Someone with the right background, the right connections, the right bank account. Sophia doesn't fit that mold, but she has something far more valuable. She genuinely loves your son." Marcus sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his misunderstanding. Everything he thought he knew about his son's needs, about what constituted a good match for their family, had been built on faulty assumptions and social expectations rather than genuine understanding. Outside his window, he could see Sophia walking across the grounds toward the staff quarters, her day's work complete. She moved with quiet confidence, unaware that her presence had just shattered the worldview of one of the most powerful men in the city. For the first time since Elena's death, Marcus found himself questioning not just his immediate plans, but the entire foundation upon which he had built his approach to fatherhood and life itself. The revelation about Sophia's true background haunted Marcus throughout the sleepless night that followed. He wandered the halls of his mansion like a ghost, seeing everything with new eyes. The pristine surfaces that Sophia had cleaned, the carefully arranged flowers she had placed in the vases, the subtle touches that had made their house feel more like a home. All of it took on new meaning, now that he understood the intelligence and care behind each action. As dawn broke over the estate, Marcus found himself standing outside Ethan's bedroom door, listening to the sound of his son's voice drifting through the crack. But Ethan wasn't alone. Sophia's gentle laughter mixed with the boy's animated chatter, and Marcus realized she must have arrived early to help Ethan get ready for school, a routine he had been completely unaware of. "Tell me the story about the brave little mouse again," Ethan's voice pleaded, and Marcus heard Sophia's warm response in accented English mixed with Spanish phrases that somehow made the words sound like music. "El ratoncito valiente lived in a big castle, just like you, mi pequeño príncipe," she began, and Marcus found himself leaning closer to the door, drawn in by the magical quality of her storytelling. But he was not happy because he had everything except the one thing that matters most. "Love," Ethan finished, clearly familiar with the tale. "Sí, amor verdadero. True love that comes not from what you have, but from who you are inside." Marcus felt his chest tighten as he recognized the parallels Sophia was drawing. This wasn't just a story. It was a lesson wrapped in gentle metaphor, designed to help a grieving child understand that his worth wasn't tied to his wealth or status. The sound of footsteps in the hallway forced Marcus to retreat to his study before he could be discovered eavesdropping. But the conversation had crystallized something that had been building in his mind since the previous day. He needed to understand Sophia Martinez, not as an employee, but as the woman who had somehow become the most important person in his son's life. Later that morning, after Ethan had left for school with his driver, Marcus made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. He sought out Sophia in the mansion's west wing, where she was methodically working through her daily cleaning routine. He found her in the library, carefully dusting the leather-bound volumes that Elena had loved so much. She worked with the reverence of someone who understood the value of knowledge, treating each book as a treasure, rather than just another object to be maintained. "Sophia," he said quietly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, surprise flickering across her features before being replaced by professional composure. "Mr. Silverstone," she said, offering a small smile. "Is there something you need?" For a moment, Marcus struggled to find the words. How did one begin a conversation that could potentially change everything? How did a man accustomed to boardroom negotiations approach a discussion about matters of the heart? "I need to talk to you," he said finally. "About Ethan, about yesterday." Sophia's expression grew guarded, and Marcus could see her preparing for the conversation she probably expected. The one where the wealthy employer explained why his son's attachment to the help was inappropriate and had to stop. "If I have overstepped in any way," she began carefully, "I apologize. I never intended to interfere with your family's decisions." "No," Marcus said quickly, holding up a hand to stop her. I'm not here to criticize you. I'm here because I realize I don't understand what's been happening in my own home." Sophia set down her cleaning cloth, giving him her full attention. In the morning light streaming through the library windows, Marcus could see the intelligence in her eyes that he had been blind to before. This wasn't the face of someone who cleaned houses by necessity. This was the face of an educated woman who had chosen to sacrifice her own career for the sake of family obligations. "Mrs. Henderson told me about your background," Marcus said, deciding that honesty was the only path forward. "About your education, your teaching experience. I feel like an idiot for not knowing, for not seeing who you really are." Sophia's expression softened slightly, but wariness remained. "I did not think it was relevant to my job here," she said simply. "You needed someone to clean your home, and I needed work. My qualifications did not matter for what you required." The quiet dignity in her response made Marcus feel even worse about his assumptions. "But they do matter," he insisted. "Especially now that I understand how much you've been helping Ethan. I need to know why." For a long moment, Sophia was quiet, seemingly weighing whether to trust him with the truth. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a depth of emotion that caught Marcus off guard. "Your son reminds me of my little brother," she said softly. "Miguel was about Ethan's age when our parents went through a very difficult time. Our father lost his job, our mother became ill, and everything we had known fell apart. Miguel stopped speaking for almost a year, lost in his own world of confusion and sadness." Marcus found himself holding his breath, sensing that this story was crucial to understanding not just Sophia's motivations, but perhaps his own son's needs. "I was older, already in university, but I came home to help. I learned that sometimes children don't need answers or solutions. They need someone to sit with them in their darkness until they're ready to find the light again." The parallel to Ethan's situation was unmistakable, and Marcus felt a stab of guilt as he realized that in his attempts to fix his son's grief, he had failed to simply be present with it. "What happened to Miguel?" he asked quietly. Sophia's face brightened with genuine warmth. "He became a doctor. He says he learned about healing from watching how patience and love could mend what seemed broken. He credits that difficult time with teaching him that the most important medicine is human connection." Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the tight control he had maintained since Elena's death. Here was proof that surviving tragedy didn't require building walls or accumulating achievements. Sometimes it required the simple act of allowing oneself to be vulnerable enough to accept love. "Ethan chose you yesterday," Marcus said, the words coming out more raw than he had intended. "When given the option of 5 accomplished women who could give him everything money can buy, he chose you. I told myself it was just a child's whim, but I think I was wrong." Sophia's eyes widened with surprise, and Marcus could see her processing the implications of his admission. "Mr. Silverstone," she said carefully, "I would never presume to think that I could take the place of Ethan's mother. I know my position here, and I know the boundaries." "What if the boundaries are wrong?" Marcus asked, the question surprising even himself. "What if everything I thought I knew about what my son needs is wrong? What if the most qualified person to help him heal has been here all along and I was too blind to see it?" The question hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and fraught with complication. Sophia stared at him with an expression that mixed hope with fear, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Before either of them could respond, the sound of a car pulling up the driveway broke the spell. Through the library windows, they could see Ethan's school car arriving hours early, and even from a distance, they could tell something was wrong. Marcus and Sophia rushed to the front entrance as Ethan's driver, Robert, helped the boy out of the car. Even from a distance, they could see that something was terribly wrong. Ethan's usually neat school uniform was disheveled, and his small shoulders shook with barely contained sobs. "What happened?" Marcus demanded as he reached them, his heart racing with parental panic. Robert, a kind man who had been driving for the family for years, looked genuinely distressed. "There was an incident at school, sir. The headmaster called for someone to pick him up immediately. Young Master Ethan hasn't spoken a word since I collected him." Marcus knelt down to his son's level, trying to make eye contact, but Ethan kept his head down, his hands clenched into small fists at his sides. "Ethan, talk to me. What happened at school?" But the boy remained silent, his breathing shallow and rapid in a way that reminded Marcus painfully of the panic attacks Ethan had suffered in the immediate aftermath of Elena's death. They had worked so hard to get past those episodes, and seeing his son in this state again felt like watching all their progress crumble. "Maybe we should call Dr. Williams," Marcus said, referring to the child psychologist who had helped them before. But as he reached for his phone, he felt a gentle touch on his arm. Sophia had moved closer, her eyes focused entirely on Ethan, with an expression of deep understanding. "May I?" she asked quietly, and something in her tone made Marcus step back without question. Sophia approached Ethan with the slow, careful movements of someone approaching a wounded animal. She didn't try to force eye contact or demand explanations. Instead, she simply sat down on the marble steps of the mansion, making herself small and non-threatening. "Hola, mi pequeño príncipe," she said softly, her voice carrying the same warmth that had comforted Ethan countless times before. "I see you're carrying something very heavy today." Ethan's rigid posture softened slightly at the sound of her voice, though he still didn't look up. "Sometimes," Sophia continued, "when we carry heavy things alone, they become too much for our small shoulders. But when we share them with someone who loves us, they become lighter." Marcus watched in amazement as his son slowly raised his head, tears streaming down his face but his eyes seeking Sophia's with desperate hope. Without a word, Ethan collapsed into her arms, and the dam finally burst. "They said my mama was a gold digger," Ethan sobbed into Sophia's shoulder. "They said she only married Daddy for money, and that's why I don't have a real family anymore. They said I'm just a rich kid who buys friends because nobody could really love me." Marcus felt the words hit him like physical blows. The cruelty of children could be devastating, but hearing his beloved Elena's memory attacked, hearing his son's deepest insecurities weaponized by classmates, filled him with a rage that he struggled to control. "Those kids don't know anything," Marcus said, his voice tight with emotion. "Your mother was the most genuine person I ever met. She loved us both more than life itself." But even as he spoke, Marcus realized that his own actions might have contributed to these attacks. His public search for a wealthy wife, the parade of accomplished women through their home, the emphasis on status and success, it had all played into the very stereotypes that were now being used to hurt his son. Sophia held Ethan close, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. "Listen to me carefully, Corazon," she whispered. "There are people in this world who measure everything by money because they don't understand what real treasure looks like. But you know the truth, don't you?" Ethan nodded against her shoulder, his sobs beginning to quiet. "Your mama loved your papa not because of what he had, but because of who he was inside. Just like how you choose the people you love, not because of what they can give you, but because of how they make your heart feel safe and happy." Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat as he watched Sophia work her gentle magic on his son. She wasn't offering empty platitudes or trying to minimize Ethan's pain. Instead, she was helping him understand the difference between shallow judgments and deep truths. "The children who said those things," Sophia continued, "they're probably scared too. When we don't understand something beautiful, sometimes we try to make it ugly so it won't make us feel small. But that doesn't make their words true." Ethan pulled back slightly to look at Sophia's face. "Do you think Mama would be disappointed in me for crying?" "Oh, mi amor," Sophia said, cupping his face gently in her hands. "Your mama would be so proud of you for feeling deeply and for being brave enough to share your pain. Tears are not weakness. They're love that has nowhere else to go." Marcus felt his own eyes filling with tears at Sophia's words. Elena had said something similar once, during one of his own moments of vulnerability. How had this remarkable woman managed to capture so perfectly the essence of what Elena would have said? "I want to go to my room," Ethan said quietly, his emotional exhaustion evident in every line of his small body. "Of course," Sophia said, helping him to his feet. "Would you like me to bring you some warm milk and tell you a story?" Ethan nodded, then surprised everyone by turning to his father. "Daddy, will you come too? I don't want to be alone." Marcus felt his heart break and heal simultaneously at his son's request. "Of course, buddy. We'll all go together." As they made their way through the mansion toward Ethan's room, Marcus found himself walking beside Sophia, both of them flanking the small boy who had brought them together in this moment of crisis. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you here." Sophia looked at him with an expression that held both sadness and hope. "He needed to know that love isn't something you can buy or earn," she said. It's something you give freely, without conditions or expectations. Marcus realized that Sophia wasn't just talking about Ethan's situation. She was describing the very foundation of genuine relationships, the principle that had guided Elena's love for their family, and perhaps the lesson that he had forgotten in his grief-driven pursuit of security and status. As they settled into Ethan's room, with Sophia preparing to weave another of her healing stories, and Marcus finally understanding what it meant to simply be present with his son's pain, the walls that had separated their different worlds began to crumble, replaced by something far more valuable than any fortune could buy. The days following Ethan's school incident brought an unexpected peace to the Silverstone mansion. For the first time since Elena's death, Marcus found himself truly present in his son's daily life. He canceled business meetings to have breakfast with Ethan, worked from home to be available when his son returned from school, and began to see their home through new eyes. What he discovered was that Sophia had been weaving herself into the fabric of their lives so gradually and naturally that her presence had become essential without anyone fully realizing it. She knew exactly how Ethan liked his sandwiches cut, which story could calm him after a nightmare, and how to make even the most mundane activities feel like adventures. Marcus spent hours observing these interactions, marveling at the easy communication between Sophia and his son. They had developed their own language of inside jokes, Spanish nicknames, and gentle rituals that spoke to a bond deeper than anything that could be manufactured or arranged. But it was during a quiet evening in the library that Marcus finally understood the full depth of what he had been blind to for so long. He had been working late when he heard soft voices coming from the reading nook where Elena used to spend her evenings. Curious, he approached quietly and found Sophia and Ethan curled up together on the window seat, looking through a photo album. "This is when Mama and Daddy got married," Ethan was saying, pointing to a picture of Marcus and Elena dancing at their wedding reception. "She looks like a princess, doesn't she?" Sophia studied the photograph with genuine appreciation. "She was beautiful," she agreed softly. "But look at your papa's face in this picture. Do you see how he's looking at her?" Ethan squinted at the image. "Like she's the most important thing in the whole world?" "Exactly. That's how someone looks when they love with their whole heart. Your mama and papa had something very special, the kind of love that makes people better than they were before." Marcus felt his breath catch as he watched Sophia honor Elena's memory with such grace and respect. There was no jealousy, no attempt to diminish what had come before. Instead, she was helping Ethan understand the beauty of his parents' love story while creating space for new possibilities. "Do you think Daddy could love someone like that again?" Ethan asked with the innocent directness that only children possess. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus found himself holding his breath as he waited for her response. "I think," she said carefully, "that people with big hearts like your papa never really stop loving. They just learn to make room for more love. The question isn't whether he could love again, but whether he's brave enough to let himself try." The words hit Marcus like a revelation. He had been so afraid of betraying Elena's memory, so convinced that moving forward meant leaving her behind, that he had closed himself off to the possibility that love could expand rather than replace. Sophia understood something that had eluded him entirely, that honoring the past didn't require sacrificing the future. "I think Mama would like Sophia," Ethan said thoughtfully. "They both know how to make people feel safe." "What makes you think that, mi pequeño príncipe?" Sophia asked gently. "Because when I'm sad, you both knew how to make the sad smaller, without making it go away. Mama used to say that being sad sometimes just means you love something so much that missing it hurts. But you taught me that I can be sad about Mama, and happy about other things at the same time." Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes as he realized that Sophia had given his son something he hadn't been able to provide: permission to feel joy without guilt, to move forward without forgetting. She had shown Ethan that the heart was capable of holding multiple truths simultaneously. Unable to remain hidden any longer, Marcus stepped into the reading nook. Both Sophia and Ethan looked up, startled by his sudden appearance. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, He struggled to find the words to express what he was feeling. "I heard you talking about Elena, and I wanted to thank you, Sophia, for helping Ethan remember her with such love." Sophia's cheeks flushed slightly, but she met his eyes steadily. "Your wife was clearly an extraordinary woman," she said simply. "Ethan carries the best parts of both his parents in his heart." The compliment, offered so naturally and without agenda, moved Marcus in a way that all the calculated charm of the 5 candidates had failed to achieve. Sophia saw their family clearly, understood their dynamic, and had found a way to honor what existed while nurturing what could be. "Daddy," Ethan said suddenly, "I need to tell you something important." Marcus sat down across from them, giving his son his full attention. "What is it, buddy?" "Yesterday, when those kids were mean to me, I felt really angry and scared. But then Sophia helped me understand something. They were trying to make me feel bad about loving Mama and you, but that's impossible because love is the best thing about me." The simple profundity of his son's words took Marcus's breath away. "You're absolutely right," he managed to say. "And I also figured out something else," Ethan continued with growing confidence. "When you asked me to choose between those fancy ladies and Sophia, it wasn't really a choice at all. Because choosing someone to love isn't about picking the person who looks best on paper. It's about picking the person who makes your heart feel like home." Marcus felt the last of his defenses crumble as he looked at his son's earnest face. Ethan had understood something that had taken Marcus years to learn and months to accept. That love wasn't a business transaction or a strategic alliance. It was a leap of faith that required courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to trust in something beyond logic or calculation. "And Sophia makes your heart feel like home?" Marcus asked gently. Ethan nodded without hesitation. "She makes everything feel like home. Even the sad parts don't feel so scary when she's here." Marcus turned to Sophia, who had been listening to this exchange with tears streaming silently down her face. "Sophia," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to say, "I owe you an apology. I judged you based on your job title instead of seeing who you really are. I was so afraid of making the wrong choice for Ethan that I almost missed the fact that he had already chosen for himself." Sophia shook her head quickly. "Mr. Silverstone, you don't need to apologize. You were protecting your son in the only way you knew how." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I was protecting my own fears. There's a difference." He took a deep breath, gathering his courage for what he needed to say next. "Ethan is right. Love isn't about credentials or qualifications. It's about connection, understanding, and the willingness to show up for someone even when it's difficult. You've been doing that for both of us, and we've been too proud or too scared to acknowledge it properly." The room fell silent, except for the gentle ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment, the sense that whatever happened next would determine not just their immediate future, but the entire trajectory of their lives as a family. 6 months later, the Silverstone mansion buzzed with an energy that had been missing for far too long. The grand ballroom, which had once felt like a mausoleum of past glories, now echoed with laughter and music as the family prepared for a celebration that no one could have predicted. Marcus stood at the tall windows overlooking the garden, watching Sophia direct the placement of flowers, with the same careful attention she had once given to cleaning. But now she moved through their home not as an employee, but as someone who belonged there, someone whose presence had transformed the cold marble halls into warm, living spaces filled with love and purpose. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. Marcus had spent weeks courting Sophia properly, not as an employer making an offer, but as a man hoping to win the heart of an extraordinary woman. He had learned about her dreams, her sacrifices, her quiet strength that had held her family together through years of hardship. He had discovered that her wisdom came not from textbooks or degrees, but from a life lived with compassion and resilience. Sophia, for her part, had been cautious about accepting his affections. She understood the vast differences in their backgrounds and worried about the challenges they would face as a couple from such different worlds. But Ethan, with the persistence that only children possess, had campaigned tirelessly for their union, pointing out at every opportunity how much happier both adults seemed when they were together. "Daddy!" Ethan's voice called from across the ballroom, interrupting Marcus's reverie. The boy came running over, his face glowing with excitement. "Sophia says the photographer wants to take some pictures before everyone arrives. Are you ready?" Marcus smiled at his son's enthusiasm. Ethan had grown so much in the past months, not just physically but emotionally. The shy, grieving child had blossomed into a confident young boy who spoke both English and Spanish fluently, who helped Sophia with her community volunteer work, and who had learned to carry his mother's memory as a source of strength rather than sorrow. "I'm ready," Marcus said, straightening his tie. "But are you sure you're ready for all of this? Today changes everything for our family." Ethan looked at his father with the solemn expression that sometimes made him seem older than his years. "Daddy, everything already changed the day you finally listened to what your heart was trying to tell you. Today we're just making it official." The simple wisdom of his son's words never ceased to amaze Marcus. Ethan had understood from the beginning what Marcus had taken months to accept, that love couldn't be planned or purchased, only recognized and embraced when it appeared. As they made their way toward the garden where the ceremony would take place, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The 5 accomplished women he had originally considered had all moved on to other opportunities, most of them ultimately grateful that they hadn't been chosen for what would have been a loveless arrangement. Victoria had even sent a thoughtful note congratulating him on finding the real thing and wishing them happiness. The guest list for today's celebration reflected the new reality of their expanded family. Sophia's parents had flown in from their home country, still somewhat overwhelmed by their daughter's fairy tale romance, but won over completely by Marcus's genuine devotion to their family. Mrs. Henderson bustled about with tears of joy in her eyes, having played matchmaker more successfully than she had ever dared hope. And scattered throughout the crowd were faces both familiar and new. Business associates who had learned to respect Sophia's intelligence and grace, community members from Sophia's volunteer work who had become dear friends, and Elena's family, who had embraced Sophia as someone who honored their daughter's memory while creating new happiness for Marcus and Ethan. The ceremony itself was simple, but deeply meaningful. Instead of elaborate vows written by others, Marcus and Sophia spoke from their hearts about the unexpected gift of finding love in the most unlikely circumstances. Sophia promised to honor Elena's memory while creating new traditions for their growing family. Marcus vowed to never again let fear or prejudice blind him to the true treasures that life offered. But it was Ethan who stole the show when he was invited to speak as the best man. Standing between his father and Sophia, looking impossibly small in his formal attire, he cleared his throat and addressed the assembled guests with touching sincerity. "My mama used to tell me that love is like a seed," he began, his clear voice carrying across the garden. "You can plant it in rich soil or poor soil, but what makes it grow isn't the ground. It's the care you give it every day. Sophia planted love in our family when we were in poor soil, when we were sad and scared and didn't know how to take care of each other anymore." The boy paused, looking up at Sophia with adoration. "She didn't try to replace my mama or make us forget her. Instead, she helped us remember all the good things Mama taught us about loving people. And now our family is like a garden with lots of different flowers. We have Mama's roses that we keep beautiful in our hearts, and Sophia's sunflowers that make everything bright and happy." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden as Ethan continued. "I know some people might think it's weird that I picked our cleaning lady to be my new mama. But those people don't understand that the best treasures don't always look fancy on the outside. Sometimes they look like someone who knows how to make sad people feel better, who remembers your favorite stories, and who loves you even when you're grumpy or scared or acting like a baby." Sophia was crying openly now, overwhelmed by the boy's beautiful words. Marcus felt his own emotions threatening to overflow as he witnessed the pure love radiating from his son. "So today isn't just about Daddy and Sophia getting married," Ethan concluded with a grin. "It's about our whole family choosing love over fear, choosing what's real over what looks good, and choosing to be happy instead of just safe. And I think Mama is somewhere smiling because she always said the best kind of love is the kind that makes everyone better." As the ceremony concluded and the celebration began, Marcus found himself marveling at the unexpected turns life could take. He had started this journey trying to give his son everything money could buy, only to discover that what Ethan truly needed had been there all along, disguised as someone society deemed not enough. Sophia had taught them both that love wasn't about perfection or status. It was about showing up day after day, with patience and kindness, and the willingness to see beyond surface appearances, to the heart of what really mattered. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, the 3 of them stood together on the mansion's front steps, watching the last cars disappear down the long driveway. The house behind them glowed with warm light, no longer a showcase of wealth, but a true home filled with laughter, learning, and love. "So," Sophia said, slipping her hand into Marcus's while Ethan leaned against her side. "What do we do now, mi familia?" Marcus looked at his new wife and his son, these two people who had taught him that the greatest riches couldn't be counted in dollars, but in moments of connection, understanding, and pure joy. "Now," he said, pulling them both close, "we live happily ever after. Not because life will be perfect, but because we'll face whatever comes together, as a family built on love instead of logic, on hearts instead of bank accounts." Ethan yawned sleepily against Sophia's shoulder. "Can we still have pancakes for breakfast tomorrow?" he asked, his priorities beautifully, perfectly childlike. Sophia laughed, the sound echoing across the peaceful grounds. "Sí, mi pequeño príncipe. We can have pancakes and stories and all the love your heart can hold." As they walked together into their home, their real home now, Marcus realized that Elena had been right about so many things, but especially about this. The most valuable things in life couldn't be bought, planned, or arranged. They could only be recognized, cherished, and chosen with the kind of courage that came from listening to the heart instead of the head. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, love found a way to bloom in the most unexpected places, proving that fairy tales didn't always need princes and princesses to come true. Sometimes they just needed people brave enough to choose love over fear, authenticity over appearance, and the simple wisdom of a child who knew that home wasn't a place but a feeling, the feeling of being loved exactly as you are.